Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 218 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got an interesting assortment. We've got a couple extinct animals, we've got a cryptid today as well. We've also got a couple really cool modern animals. So I'm not going to keep your attention for too long. We're going to get started with Sky Polaris, who's made a couple big cats, as they always do. This is the Marzoi, I believe we say that. So a very interesting one here. So the Marzoi is a name that has been given to a type of spotted felid, very similar to a lion, that it was sighted in Kenya in the early 20th century. And there's claims that skins of hunted specimens fitting the description do exist. None of them are really available for biologists to come to any definite conclusion about the animals, so it's kind of become a cryptid. There have been claims it was a poorly described species of subspecies of lion, or there is potentially lions that have kept their spotted pattern as juveniles right into adulthood for whatever reason. So that's potentially, kind of like a morph of a African lion. So there were claims of local East African legends of these spotted lions, and the first sighting was in 1903 by Colonel Richard Mahadajan, it was however you say that, but found a dark lion with these rosettes in Kenya. He had previously heard of them, but may not have taken this very seriously. There was another incident where farmer Michael Trent in 1931 killed two individuals, a male and a female, out in Nairobi as well. So they caught them and then were like, oh, this is interesting. And they seemed to be smallish adult lions. They were, but it seemed to look like they were they had this spots of cubs, but they were adult lions with spots, which is interesting as well. And then 2 years later, they actually had an expedition to try and catch more specimens, and they had only really circumstantial evidence of these lions. They did potentially find the herd of buffalo during the hunt. They were tracking a lion, ruling out the probability of these being cubs. But there's other few sightings. But again, people are very skeptical of these things. In the 1950s, it was stipulated by Robert Fawn, who was skeptical of their existence. He said there were a small group of Somali lions, the population local there, including like spotted individuals that may have just plains lions that have retained their cub spots. Because if you look at baby lions, they do have spots. Little rosettes, and then maybe just for some reason retain them into life. So it may be a genetic issue, or maybe just a mutation or something like that. So yeah, there's really not that much evidence really other than that. So it's very interesting that we haven't found anything since the 1950s, which is very weird. But anyway, we're going to carry on anyway. That's probably why it's encrypted. Sky Polaris also made another really, really cool mod here. This is another extinct subspecies of tiger. This is Panthera tigris chilenensis. So this is a very interesting one. This is also known as a Trinil tiger. They're an extinct subspecies that date back to the Middle Pleistocene, about 1.2 million years ago, and are found in Java, in Indonesia. And the fossil remains are now held in the Dubis collection in the Netherlands and Leiden. Although the fossils have been found in Java, they're thought not to be the ancestors of the modern Javan tiger that just recently went extinct. As the fossils of these guys had quite large bodies, and maybe there's no evidence of genetics really. Their competitors may have preyed on the same individuals, which results in limiting resources and things like that. And it probably went extinct 50,000 years ago. That's when it's thought to have gone extinct. And the Bali tiger was also not closely related because of time differences. So in terms of where it lived in Indonesia, particularly in Java and Trinil. Though according to some zoologists, it could be the ancestor of all these Indonesian subspecies, and perhaps East Asia was actually a centre for the origin of the pantherine, so lions, tigers, all that stuff, panthers. The oldest tiger fossils are found in the early Pleistocene of Java, that are about 2 million years old, and they were seen to be quite common in Asia, even at the beginning of the Pleistocene. However, seems to be a lot of variation due to glacial and interglacial variations, and other geological events may have caused repeated changes. So they may have gone more south or more north, depending on interglacials, and like most other species would have done during the Pleistocene, because there was a lot of change during that time. In terms of its taxonomy, not really much is known, but they have discovered fossils that believed to belong to these guys. There were doubts that the fossil could belong to them because they were too big. But now it's what they might have been a bit smaller than Bengal tigers, so not quite as big as Bengals and Sumatrans. Um, but they would have been similar in size to Indo-Chinese tigers. Food competition among large carnivores would have been quite an interesting motivation to get larger, because you think you've got dholes, you've got potentially wolves around that time. The wolves don't really live in Southeast Asia now. They may have back then. Saber-toothed cats, lions would also been around in Southeast Asia at the time. So there's a lot of competition and a lot more pressure than today, where we just have, a small population of lions. Tigers are pretty much the top of the rung, but there was a lot of competition in Pleistocene Southeast Asia at the time. And they may have weighed about slightly less than today's Bengal tigers, and would have got up between 110 to 150 kilograms, or 240 to 330 pounds. So mid-range, higher mid-range for tiger sizes. Be a really, really cool. And you got cute little babies, of course. How can you not? All right, that's Sky Polaris done for the moment. Next up, we have got a mod by Lorby. We're going back in time as well. This is an extinct species of camelid. This is Probolatherium wilsoni. So a very interesting kind of little guy here. So there is a few different species of this guy, but as I mentioned, we'll be focusing on Wilsonia. So Probolatherium, these are an extinct genus of a camelid that was only found in North America and lived through the Eocene to the Miocene, so between 46 and 13.6 million years ago, and would have lived for approximately 30 million years. So this was first discovered by scientist Joseph Leddy in 1848, and its relationships with the other White River fossils were then expanded by him in 1853. And fur trapper Samuel Kobeliston was working in Nevada in pursuit of fur-bearing mammals, and actually found this collection of fossils where it was described. He sent the box of these bones at his family's back east, and so he sent them to them, not knowing what to make of them, and then they forwarded the remains to Letty to try and identify them. And several animal remains were included in this package, but most interesting, there was a small animal the size of a small deer or sheep, with a partial skull and forelimb, and then Letty surmised that they're actually more closely related to modern llamas, and that kind of got that, whoa, there's a type of llama. And then these new materials were found in between 1848 and 53. They were moved to Probolatherium. And Probolatherium basically means grass-eating beast, or Probolus means grass-eating, therium beast. The scientific name is the Latinized names for put in this place. So Wilsoni is because is the holotype, and is also Wilsoni because it's named. I think after someone, I don't know exactly who. Wilson doesn't really say here on the Wikipedia. But anyway, there are 3 different species of these guys. This is the holotype. So, as I've mentioned before, because I've talked about other camel species, the Asian and South American camels are actually kind of very weird, because most of evolutionary history for camels has been in North America, and there's lots of different types of prehistoric camel in North America, and they only went extinct in America 10,000 years ago, when the last species of camel in America went extinct. About that time, the Western camel, or the yesterday's camel, it's also called. So that leaves, they're extinct in where they evolved, and now they only survive in Asia and South America, really. Or Africa, if you count the dromedary camel. So they look more like modern camels than some of their predecessors or earlier relatives, but at 90 centimeters tall, or about 3 feet in height, they are much smaller and about the size of modern sheep. And they do have a skull that resembles that of a modern llama, with limbs ended in hooved toes that were built for speed, and the feet of other late relatives. Despite this apparent adaptation, so they were adapted to open plains and things like that, the White River Formation seems to have been a lot of forest and rivered overbanks, which means they were probably pretty generalist. And though the name Probellotherium means grass-eating beast, it's actually more likely that this animal was a mixed browser, or potentially a browser, or a mixed feeder, so they would have potentially just eaten pretty much any greenery they could reach. And unlike their modern cousins, which are adapted for desert or alpine conditions, Probellotherium easily kind of took the place of a deer or a gazelle in that ecosystem. Um, and this trait was taken to extreme in later camels, notably Stenomylus, which I think I've covered before. And fossil evidence showed that this guy was a popular prey item for telodonts such as Archaeotherium, and remains of partial carcasses of these guys have been found that apparently have been killed or cached by Insanotherium, which is a species of entelodont, like a relative of something like Daodon, which is interesting. And is the only animal known from the White River ecosystem. So it's basically, it could be Archaeotherium because it really was the only thing that could have made these marks on these bones. Um, but yeah, Probellotherium lies within the clade Camelidae, and so it is a type of camel, and it's Probellotherium lies outside of Cameline proper, and it's the most recent common ancestor between Probellotherium and Camelus. So it's the kind of the latest, the earliest camel, true camel, you could say, pretty much. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where it relates on the camel family tree. And it is a really nice model. I like giving a lot of these species a little bit more love. Some of these funky guys, especially if you want to make, paleo mods and things. Did a really good job, Lorby, always a winner. All right, so next up we're going to be moving to some modern animals. Next up we've got Baikanu, who's made the black giant squirrel. So it's a very interesting one as well. It's part of their India pack, I think it is. So this is the India, or the black giant squirrel, or the Malayan giant squirrel. It is a large tree squirrel native to the Indo-Malaysian zootype, and they are found from northern Bangladesh, northeastern India, eastern Nepal, Bhutan, China, Myanmar, Laos, right into all those countries down into western Indonesia, and found like places like Bali and stuff like that. So quite a wide range. They're also distinct for being one of the largest species of squirrel in the world. On average, an adult black giant squirrel weighs between 1.05 to 1.25 kilograms, between 2.3 to 2.8 pounds. And has a head to body length of 34 to 37 centimeters, or 13 to 15 inches. And the tail is about 41 to 42 centimeters, or 16 to 17 inches long. There is a subspecies that averages is about 30 centimeters, a little bit smaller. There is a lot of subspecies. I'm not sure how they're truly defined, but the species typically has a distinct bicolored dark upper parts and pale underparts, as you kind of see there. We'll have a look one that's actually moving around like that. You can see dark top, light bottom. It's got the black on the top, the back, the top of the head, the ears, and the bushy tail are deep brown to black, while the undersides are typically a lightly buff color. And in Java, Sumatra, and Bali, the hairs on the back and the tail are lightly tipped, which makes them appear a little bit more pale. However, these guys are still quite dark in comparison. And there are some populations that have kind of orange to reddish underparts as well. So Rafuta bicolors range includes a variety of different regions. They are found all over the place. They do like forested habitats. They range up from sea level to 2,500 meters above sea level, but obviously due to human encroachment, their populations have reduced, and because of agriculture, timber harvesting and agriculture, has resulted in at least a 30% drop in their populations over the past 10 years. Though in some places they are protected by humans by law or tradition. In a lot of areas, they live in forests, all sorts of different types of forests, tropical forests. Though in tropical rainforests in Malaysia, they're not as abundant as elsewhere due to competition with other things like monkeys. But they seem to be doing quite well. And also, there's a recent study from India that shows participation during the wetter months of the year is one of the major contributing factors for the habitat preferences. So they seem to like areas where they like, if it's wetter, they will like it there. So depending on how wet it gets, that seems to be something they like. Also, more than 20% of presence records of the species have been observed high above sea level, and it's actually predicted by this study that in India the species will lose a lot of preferred habitat because of climate change. So that's quite interesting as well. In terms of their behavior, though, they are diurnal and arboreal. So they like to come out during the day, but they also, um, you know, climb in the trees. But sometimes they do climb down to the forest from the forest canopy and feed on the ground. And they really into plantations or settlements. They do prefer living in native forest. Their diet consists of seeds, pine cones, fruits, and leaves, and they're primarily solitary and typically have litters of about 1 to 2, which they raise in a dray or nest, often located within the hollow part of a tree, very similar to other squirrels. And there is a lot of research into their taxonomy, whether they could actually be split into a few different species. There's 10 different recognized subspecies of the black giant squirrel. Though, that potentially could be split in the future. That's just kind of a thing of research. They do have quite a huge range. Though it is possible they could be just a really variable species. But yeah, that's something worth looking into if you are curious enough about these giant squirrels and you have the technical know-how. Yeah, very, very cool. Another cool Kanu mod. So next up, we've got Great Cakes Mods, who's got very cool mods here today. We've got here, this is the Western Quoll. So a very, very cool little guy. So the Western Quoll is the largest endemic mammalian carnivore to Australia, Western Australia at least, and one of the many marsupial mammals native to Australia, and is also known as the Cuttich. I believe you say that. I've never heard anyone say that before. But anyway, they are a member of the family Tsurudae, which is marsupial carnivores, and they are more closely related to the bronze quoll, which is a recently described species that comes from New Guinea, and was sometimes actually thought to be an outlying population of these quolls. So they were originally considered to be the same species, then they were split. The species name Jeffersoni is a prominent French naturalist, Etoile Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire, who named the genus in 1796. And also known as the Cuttich in Western Australia. I believe that comes from some Aborigine words. But in terms of their description, they are quite an interesting little guy. They look about the size of a domestic cat. They are also coloured in rufous brown and have 40 to 70 white spots along their back with a creamy white undersides. The spots help diminish their outline in the moonlight, for hunting. They have 5 toes and their hind feet are in granular pads. The head to body length is about 36 to 46 centimeters, or about 14 to 18 inches, and the tail is about 22 to 30 centimeters, or 8.7 to 11.8 inches. And with large eyes and pointed ears, they are well adapted to hunting at night. The black bush on its tail extends halfway down the tip, and males typically are a little bit bigger. They weigh about 1.3 kilograms, or 2.9 pounds. While the female weighs about 0.9 kilograms, or about 2 pounds. And the longest they typically live is 4 years, so they don't live very long like most marsupials. Often confused with the eastern quoll, the main way to tell them apart is the first toe on the hind foot is different, so they have the first toe on the hind foot and they also have a darker tail. And they do also share a white spotted brown coat and a long tail both with the eastern quoll and the northern quoll. So they're very similar. There are ways to tell them apart. So in terms of their habitat, they were once found across 70% of the Australian continent. Now they're only really confined to the southwestern corner of Western Australia, and this is perhaps due to European settlement, where their range declined due to because of human settlement. Currently inhabits wet and dry forests that consist of the Jarrah forest and the Mali. They live in open forests, woodlands, and open scrub, so they're quite generalist in terms of their habitat. And as a result of its carnivorous feeding habits, they do have large ranges. Their territories will often share rocky ledges or open spaces, and this serves to mark territory and for social functions. Males will spread their territory over about 15 square kilometres, or about 5 square miles, and typically overlaps with the ranges of several females, which typically range about 3 to 4 square kilometres, or about 1.2 to 1.5 square miles. And although males share larger territories with smaller female territories, females do not cross theirs with other females, and most female home ranges contain about 70 hollow log dens and about 110 burrows. So that, yeah, that's quite big there. In terms of their behaviour, they are solitary and mostly nocturnal and also terrestrial, so they mostly hang out on the ground. The western quoll is most active at dusk, so about the crepuscular when they hunt. They move quite swiftly on the ground, and they climb quite efficiently, as you can see here, and may dig or occupy existing burrows. Though during the day, they tend to prefer hiding in hollow logs and earth burrows and dens. And they save energy by lowering their body temperature as they sleep. The western quoll is the top of the food chain at the moment, and depends on the resources abundance for healthy ecosystems. Being a carnivore, they do feed on large vertebrates and any small animals really they find. That includes birds, frogs, spiders, insects, and small mammals. The largest they will eat will things such as bandicoots and parrots. Though that reintroduced populations have actually been known to prey on rabbits and bettongs, which is quite interesting as well. They hunt mostly on the ground, but will climb a tree to grab a bird's egg, and a bite to the back of the head typically kills a larger prey. And it possesses the ability to obtain most of the water it needs from its food, which is quite handy, especially in areas in Australia where there's quite a lot of droughts. As seasonal breeders, though, western quolls mate between late April and July, and then have a peak in June. We'll find the little babies as we talk about that because they are very, very cute. During this time, the western quoll tends to take up large areas of habitat, and females aggressively defend their territory of 55 to 120 hectares. Males and females typically meet up only once, and though there's occasional cases where more young is produced than can be nursed, most range from about 2 to 6. There's a gestational period of about 16 to 23 days, which follows by the young living in their mother's shallow pouch, and then they stay in the pouch for about 7 to 15 weeks until the young outgrow the pouch and then leave in the den while the female goes left in the den while the female forages. Then they are weaned at about 23 to 24 weeks, and they become independent at about 18 weeks of age, and are sexually mature at about a year of age. And the young will then disperse into in November to take over these territories. And the western quoll is known as the Tabala by the Adjari language of the Australian Aborigines, and there's also many Dreamtime stories about them like that. But sadly, they have declined quite a bit due to a lot of factors, mainly because of land clearing, inappropriate fire regimes, grazing by stock and feral herbivores, illegal shooting, accidentally drowning in water tanks, being hit by motor vehicles, and poisoning or responsible for disappearances. They also compete with foxes and cats, with both actually predating on them, and the competition, they compete with quoll for food. As more land becomes less suitable for living in, they are forced to move elsewhere. And they actually protect the species AWC by using a comprehensive feral program, which sees feral cat and fox numbers controlled using baiting and trapping. And there are ongoing kind of attempts to reintroduce them to former parts of their range, so that's quite cool, making sure that they can get back into the wild, which is what we want to see, of course. There was a 5-year reintroduction of western quoll into the Fiddler's Range, or Findler's Range, in April 2014. And despite a loss of about a third of the population due to feral cats, there was some that survived. And as of 2022-2023, they've kind of actually monitored the population and seem to be doing better. They've also been returned to the South Australian arid zone at Mount Gibson as well, and there is plans to introduce in places such as Dirk Harlog Island in Shark Bay, the Yorick Peninsula in South Australia, also the Mallee Cliffs, and all in New South Wales. And there's also zoos breeding and releasing the species. So there is a lot of help for this guy, and they are considered near threatened. Or vulnerable, depending on who you ask, but that's still quite cool to see there's a lot of efforts into helping them. But anyway, we've got another great cakes mod to look at, and this time it's an eagle. We've got the African fish eagle. So let's have a look at this guy. So very, very cool. Let's have a look at you. So the African fish eagle, Ichthyophaga vocifer, I believe you say that. These guys are a large species of eagle that is found all throughout sub-Saharan Africa. So the African fish eagle is in the species placed in the genus Ichthyophaga, or the fish eagles, and its closest relative is the Madagascar fish eagle, which is critically endangered. And like all sea eagle species pairs, this one consists of the white-headed species of the African white fish eagle has got the white head, and then the Madagascan one has the tan head. And is this ancient lineage of sea eagles, and like other sea eagles, they have dark talons, beaks, and eyes. And both species have at least partially white tails, even as juveniles. And the Vocifer comes from the original genus name, so named by the French naturalist François Levenant, who call it the voceraceous one. So these guys are quite a large species of bird, as you can see. The female, at about 3.2 to 3.6 kilograms, or 7.1 to 7.9 pounds, is larger than the male, who's about 2 to 2.5 kilograms, at about 4.4 to 5.5 pounds, which is typical sexual dimorphism for these birds. Males typically have a wingspan of about 2 meters, or about 6'6", while females have a wingspan of about 2.4 meters, or about just under 8 feet. The body length is about 63 to 75 centimeters, or 25 to 29 inches. And the adults, you can see, are very distinctive, as they have a mostly brown body with a white head like a bald eagle and a large, powerful black wings. And the head and breast of them are snow white. The head, breast, and tail are snow white, except for their featherless face, which you can see is yellow. The eyes are dark brown, and their hook-shaped beak, which is ideal for their lifestyle, is yellow with a black tip. And the plumage of the juveniles is brown, and the eyes are paler. So you can see a look at the juvenile here. So you can see just paler versions of the adults. Their feet's also got quite rough soles and powerful talons, which are equipped to grab slippery aquatic prey. And while this species mainly subsists on fish, they will eat a wide variety of prey, as we'll get into. And they have quite a distinctive cry, and evokes the spirit and essence of Africa. So you've probably heard it before. And the Quoll shriller, which is uttered by males. It's something that you've probably heard, and if you've ever been to Africa or a show, you think, oh, that is definitely something sounds like Africa. Anyway, so the distribution and habitat of the species. Let's have a look at you. I don't know why you did that. Anyway, there's still quite a common species found near freshwater lakes, rivers, and reservoirs, although they can sometimes be found near the coasts or at the mouths of rivers or lagoons. They are indigenous to sub-Saharan Africa and live throughout most of the continental Africa, south of the Sahara Desert. So pretty much, if anywhere south of Sahara Desert, you'll mostly find these guys. But some places in particular that you'll spot them is the Orange River in South Africa and Namibia, the Ongavango Delta, Lake Malawi, and Lake Victoria as well. So any decent, really, bits of habitat, you'll find them. And they're quite generalist. As long as they've got open water and good perch options, they can live in many different habitats that include grass and swamps, tropical forests, and things like that, and even coastlines, as we mentioned. Though they are absent from arid areas with little surface water. So in terms of reproduction, they do breed during the dry season, which is quite interesting as well. Let's see if we can spot you, little baby. There you go. So they will breed during the dry season, where water levels are low. They are believed to mate for life, and pairs will often construct 2 or more nests, which they frequently reuse. Because nests are reused and built over the years, they can get to be quite large, some reaching about 2 meters across and 1 meter deep, are about 6.5 foot wide and about 3.9 feet deep. The nests are placed in a large tree and are built mostly from sticks or other pieces of wood. So the female will lay 1 to 3 eggs typically, which are primarily white with some reddish speckles. Incubation is mostly done by the female, but the male will incubate when the female leaves to hunt. Incubation will typically take between 42 to 45 days before the chicks hatch, and siblicide does not normally occur, and the parents will often successfully rear 2 or more chicks a year. The chicks will then fledge or get their adult feathers at about 70 to 75 days, and post-fledging dependence lasts for about 3 months. But then the juveniles will become nomadic and may congregate in groups away from the territorial adults. And those that survive their first year have a life expectancy of some 12 to 24 years. I'm just going to grab a drink. Alright, cool. So let's have a look at these goobers, these goofy goobers, as they run around. Alright, so diet. As you can suspect from a fish eagle, they do like to eat fish. So they will mainly eat fish, and they swoop down from upon their perch, snatching the prey from the water with their curved talons, and then they fly back to its perch and eat it. Like other sea eagles, the African fish eagle has structures on its toes called spiracles that allow them to grasp fish and other slippery prey. The osprey, which is a winter visitor to Africa, also has this adaptation. African fish eagles usually catch fish that are between 200 to 1,000 grams, or between 0.44 and 2.2 pounds. But fish up to 4.5 kilos, or 9 pounds, or 4,200 grams, have been taken. If it catches a fish that's too heavy to sustain flight, they will drop it in the water and paddle to the nearest shore with its wings, so they will swim with it. Mullets and catfish are quite common prey, though some various fish like cichlids, tilapias, lungfish, eels, and churricans have all been taken. Even African tigerfish can be preyed upon by fish eagles, even while protecting especially while protecting barn swallows in flight. In terms of birds, though, they will also feed on birds, especially water birds such as ducks, coots, cormorants, grebes, darters, hatchlings of egrets and the hatchings of herons and egrets, storks, ibises, spoonbills, cormorants, worsted terns, and ducks, and both adult and hatchling greater and lesser flamingos. Other prey includes doves, small turtles and terrapins, baby crocodiles, Nile monitors, skinks, frogs, especially bullfrogs, insects, especially termites, and carrion. And then sometimes they'll even take mammalian prey such as hyraxes, monkeys, rats, hares, and dik-diks. And they've also been observed feeding on domestic fowl. The African fish eagle is also known to steal catches from other species, which is a method called kleptoparrotism, where basically they'll just staunch out the animal that made the kill and eat their food. The African fish eagle is also known to steal the catches of other birds, as mentioned that before. Targeted species that they'll target for this, to steal their kills will be large wading birds, such as Goliath herons, hammer-knocks, marabou storks, and shoebills, as well as kingfishers, pelicans, ospreys, and other fish eagles, which usually hunt large fish and take a long time to handle them. In terms of their relationship with humans, they are doing okay. They're considered least concern. The population is estimated to be about 300,000 individuals, and they live in an area of about 18 million square kilometers. And they actually considered in the form of the Zimbabwe bird, they are the national bird of Zimbabwe, and they're also featured on the coat of arms of Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, and South Sudan, and the Zambian flag. And there have actually been mummified examples of these eagles that have been found in the necropolis and Ekalab as well. So there are Egyptian mummies of these eagles, which is very, very interesting. So yeah, a really, really cool species that we get to talk about. And next up, last but certainly not least, we have got the Imperial Mammoth. So let's have a look at these guys. So the Imperial Mammoth is technically not a true species. This is a mod commissioned by Kanu, but this is a type. This is the Colombian Mammoth. So if you guys know much, I'm not going to... I don't think I've actually covered the Colombian Mammoth much before, but I'm going to go into just a quick roundabout. I have covered before. Leaf did a mod. But we're just going to quickly go over what the Colombian Mammoth is, and then we're going to talk about the Imperial Mammoth is and why it's lumped into that or something. So the Colombian Mammoth is an extinct species of mammoth that lived in North America, ranged from southern Canada down to Costa Rica during the Pleistocene epoch, and they are believed to have descended from Eurasian steppe mammoths that colonized North America during the early Pleistocene, so about 1.5 to 1.3 million years ago, and then later actually hybridized as well with woolly mammoths. They were considered among the last mammoth species, and the pygmy mammoths from the Channel Islands evolved from them as well, and their closest living relative is the Asian elephant. In terms of their size, they are quite big. I believe a lot of the largest specimens of the Colombian mammoth are actually believed to be examples of the Imperial mammoth as well. So the Imperial mammoth is like a lot of those specimens are considered quite large specimens of Colombian mammoths. So they reached between 3.72 and 4.2 meters in height, so between 12 to 13 feet, and between at the shoulders, and weighed between 9 to 12 tons, or 9 to 13, so like 9 to 12 tons, we'll say that. So they were among the largest species of mammoths, larger than both woolly mammoths and African bush elephants, which is the largest land animal today. They had long curved tusks and 4 molars at a time, which were replaced 6 times throughout their lives, very similar to modern elephants. They mostly used their tusks and trunks like modern elephants for fighting and foraging, so in most aspects they were very similar to modern elephants. Bones, hair, dung, and stomach contents have all been discovered from these mammoths, but not frozen remains or not preserved carcasses like you find for woolly mammoths, mainly because of because it's a lot warmer. They seem to have preferred open areas such as parkland landscapes and fed on sedges, grasses, and other plants. They did not live in the Arctic region of Canada, where they lived with where woolly mammoths lived, and the ranges of these two species would have overlapped quite a bit and would have interbred. And there have been several sites as well containing multiple Columbian mammoths, mainly believed to have died because of drought or because places like the La Brea tar pits, where they would have died together. So in terms of taxonomy, in terms of the Columbian mammoth was obviously the first described. That's why the Columbian, Mammothus columbi kind of stuck because it is the oldest. So Mammothus columbi was first described by Falconer in 1857, while Mammothus imperator was actually named by Joseph Leddy, we talked about him before, in 1858. So yeah, that was kind of a cheeky workout there. So let's have a look at you. Very, very beautiful you are. So let's see if we can wait for you to get up. But anyway, we're going to carry on talking. So we already talked about like how they were described. But yeah, then the first general mammoths. So yeah, it's quite interesting. A lot of them were lumped because a lot of different species were all put together now, and the main modern species of mammoth that you get now are the a couple of like the African mammoth. You get the Realis mammoth, the European mammoth, and you get steppe mammoth, woolly mammoth, Columbian mammoth, and a couple other dwarf species of mammoth that you get there. But the Imperial mammoth was considered to be the same. There wasn't many differences between the Columbian mammoth and the Imperial mammoth, so they were lumped together. So yeah, that's kind of why they are considered what they are. So they were considered, there were no diagnostic traits to really separate them from Columbian mammoths, so they're all considered the same thing. So we'll actually have a look in the Zoopedia and we'll talk a little bit about the whale subspecies. I don't know if I call them a subspecies, but they are quite large. The Imperial mammoth represents a pre-hybridation stage of North American mammoth evolution, as it went extinct shortly after woolly mammoth arrived in North America. So you could say, by this logic, is a pre-integration population of Columbian mammoths before woolly mammoths came in and crossbred with them. At the time, woolly and Columbian mammoths began crossbreeding and revolving more drive traits, and that would have created the Jefferson's mammoth, or Mammothus jeffersoni, which was a hybridization or more obvious hybrids populations of Columbian mammoths and woolly mammoths. And the species lived farther east into the Great Lakes region. And some argue that all non-woolly North American mammoths should be disregarded. This isn't entirely true, as there's many species North American mammoth and distinguished. So the Imperial mammoth represents the Imperial and Jefferson mammoths represents intraspecific variation or hybridizations in mammoth species in North America. So they're considered different populations or different examples of hybridization or clines of Columbian mammoths. So that's what they're kind of arguing for here. But yeah, really, really cool. You can see that in North America. See the species data. They went extinct because of humans. Kind of mention that all the time. So these guys likely would have went extinct because of humans. But you could also argue maybe the pre-hybridization mammoths could have gone extinct because of hybridization, and that's something that does happen in species where they pretty much the hybridization kind of takes over, and you lose that genetic purity. You don't get pure imperial mammoths anymore. Though I would argue purity is a very human concept, and I wouldn't personally worry about it too much because nothing's pure these days. Even humans, we've got Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA in us. Why worry about it? But anyway, they aren't too different. They just represent variation within the Columbian mammoth species. Maybe I don't know if we have genetics from imperial mammoth specimens or ones that were considered imperial mammoths. So I don't know if you could say this is one that wasn't hybridized, or but using morphological traits, it seems that Jefferson mammoths do have a mix of traits from woolly and Columbian mammoths. So that's like their hybridizations. These guys probably don't have the same kind of hybridization, so they're in potentially an untouched or an earlier radiation of the Columbian mammoth. So it's all considered the same species, and that's why the Imperial mammoth or Mammothus imperator is considered invalid and just part of the Columbian mammoth as well. So yeah, there was all these mammoths. There's all sorts of different names. It's like it was actually considered elephants at one point, but a lot of them use varieties like Imperator, Mammoths, Imperator, da 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 da. So they're all kind of lumped, and now they've been declared junior synonyms, and they all represent either advanced stages. So the idea of this kind of comes along. The idea that the species of M. Imperator or the Imperial Mammoth and the Jefferson Mammoths were more advanced or primal stages is actually considered dismissed, but they just represent different variation within the species. But yeah, really, really cool. That's another great one by Kanu. It is a little big though. I have mentioned it's a little big. Like if you look at the size, even this female, if you go in there, if it's accurate, 3.81 meters tall. That should be the size of a large male. It is a little bit too big, but that's something that could easily be changed with an update. But yeah, look at this cute little baby. Very, very cute. And, the female tusks be a bit smaller. But yeah, really, really nice mod. And cool to talk about, some other mammoths and things like that. So yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So yeah, thank you, Kanu. Thank you, Sky Polaris. Thank you, Lorby. And thank you, Great Cakes. You've done great jobs with all your mods. And yeah, really, really awesome. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like and subscribe, always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.